The United States is now one step closer to vaccinating young kids after Pfizer announced today its lower dose vaccine produced a robust immune response in 5 to 11-year-olds. Now, normally this is where I'd encourage you to look at the underlying clinical data for yourselves, but you can't because Pfizer has yet to release it, meaning we don't actually know how effective the vaccine actually is at preventing severe illness or death in young children. And of course, that didn't stop Dr. Fauci from seizing the moment.
I am not at all surprised by the data that it is safe and induces the kind of immune response that you would expect to be protective in children from 11 down to 5. Many mothers and fathers and caretakers are concerned about children and are really waiting now to be able to vaccinate those younger children.
Joining me now, Dr. Scott Atlas, former Trump White House COVID advisor, Hoover Institution senior fellow and author of the new book, A Plague Upon Our House, available for pre-order now on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Dr. Atlas, why is Pfizer holding this data so close to its chest?
Well, thanks for having me, Laura. That's a good question. I mean, I think that the headlines and the comments saying this is some kind of exciting news are bizarre at best. First of all, they say it's safe, but they don't report any of the safety data. To have a vaccine deemed safe in kids who have extraordinarily low risk from the illness itself, you'd have to have essentially zero side effects. So let's see the safety data. But to then say that it's efficacious, the efficacy has been demonstrated, has been written in newspapers all over the country, is really sort of absurd. I mean, all they did was they did not talk about cases, they didn't talk about serious illness, they didn't talk about hospitalizations, they didn't talk about deaths, and they had no control group, by the way, none. And so all they did was they demonstrated that if you inject an experimental drug into a child, you will be able to measure antibodies on a blood test. That's not what vaccines are for. Vaccines are for protecting against serious illness. And as that clip showed, I would be very concerned, as Dr. Fauci said, but I'd be very concerned if I had a young child that people wanted to inject the vaccine into for a disease that they have really extraordinarily low risk for, that there's no safety data long-term on a vaccine like this, because we've never had the vaccine around for long-term. And don't forget, if you're going to start vaccinating young kids, they're going to be living for decades after having this vaccine. So we need to know long-term. And, the whole thing is just, again, it's almost surreal to think that we have devolved into a society where we're injecting experimental drugs into young children who have extraordinarily low risk from the disease that we're supposed to protect them from.
I want people to see.
Go ahead.
Yeah, people have to see the numbers here, okay? And this has no context with it. There's no context of comorbidities or if a child has an underlying, heartbreaking cancer condition, or none of that's available here. But ages 0 to 4, there were 159 COVID deaths. Age 5 to 18, 357 for the entire pandemic. Now, we heard one of the top docs on TV, I think it was at Osterholm or one of those guys, say that it's more deadly than the flu for kids. Dr. Atlas, is it more deadly for the flu than the flu for children with those numbers?
Well, what they're doing is, they're distorting the numbers. They're adding up over a period of almost 2 years now how many deaths have occurred, and they're claiming that that is larger than the number of deaths in a single flu season, which lasts a couple of months. But when you look at the percent mortality, when you look at the percent survival, just as an example, in California, the last flu season data, 5.4% of deaths were in kids. 0% of COVID deaths had been in kids in California. 0%. Not zero deaths, but 0%. When you look at Florida, 0% deaths have been in kids. When you look at all the CDC data from all over the world, we shouldn't even be having this discussion.
This conversation.
This
is
outrageous. Frightening that we're having this conversation at this point. I don't understand what's happening. We're either living in a society that believes in facts or we're not. I mean, no matter how many times people claim the earth is flat, the earth is round, and no matter how many times they say it, it does not change the shape of the earth. The data is in. Kids have an extraordinarily low risk, period, and anyone who says otherwise is really not even to be listened to at this point.
Well, Dr. Atlas, thank you for coming on. Of course, they keep repeating that. Well, it's making the teachers safer and the healthcare workers safer and the child care workers safer if the kids are vaccinated, but they're all vaccinated. So again, none of it makes sense.